Imagine yourself living in a tiny village at the seaside. You have a happy family and a school job you love. You have wonderful colleagues. Undying school rituals, graduation ceremonies are always held near the building of the village council. First day of classes are celebrated at the school stadium. Nothing's unusual, and the routine is sometimes even boring. Until one day, explosions wake you up. As you open the door of your house, you see missiles flying at you. In the next couple of days, you find yourself living under Russian occupation. During the next couple of weeks, Russian tanks enter your village. The village council building now has the Russian flag waving above it. Then the person you know is taken from home to the basement. Then you pluck the courage to leave your home and escape the occupation. You have no idea whether you'll be able to come back home one day. My name is Catherine Litvinchova, and this is the second season of UA, The Day That We Survived podcast. The war Russia has started against Ukraine impacts the entire world. The food blockade, prices increase, energy blackmail. This is not the total harm the Russian Federation has already inflicted, and we cannot keep silent about it. We invite you to visit our Patreon page to support our efforts as an independent media and a podcast platform. You can find a link in the description of this episode. When we were working on the separate episode about life under occupation, we received a recording from the man who left his home in June. We cannot state his first and last name for security reasons. His relatives still live under occupation. So let's call him Oleg. This is the story of a one person, but there are thousands, tens of thousands of such stories. These people didn't just lose a home, they lost so much more: the sense of security and plans for the future. Oleg used to work as a school principal. He tells us about the beginning of the full-scale war.
We hadn't faced combat in our region as is. Yes, we did hear the explosions when the missiles were launched from the sea. It was scary. Those explosions were massive. Everybody prepared their basements and took warm clothing and water. Stores became empty in a moment. That was also scary. Village stores are small, and there's not too much produce. And until the second week of the war, the shelves were nearly empty. Buying bread became a massive struggle because the route to Kherson was blocked. People couldn't sell the milk they produced. Milk trucks stopped coming. People would feed it to animals and gift it to each other. During the first month, the local government and all its deputies tried not to abandon the people. They organised free bread drives for everyone who needed it, and also gave salt and fish. They gave us some cereals too. People also had something saved up, so we survived using the minimal food we had. We felt the sleazy occupiers' tentacle coming for us around late March. They started pressuring our representatives in local government. We saw the rallies in Kherson. People chanting that Kherson is Ukraine gave us confidence and hope that this will be over soon and that the occupiers will get out of our land. But within several weeks, they started to disperse these rallies brutally, of course. We feared being cut off from civilization, off from the free land of Ukraine. We were all alone and we didn't know what to do.
People used to rally in some villages in early April. They faced repercussions very quickly. Pro-Ukrainian deputies of the local councils were the first to suffer. Armed Russians came to them and demanded to switch to their side. At the same time, school instruction was still on.
Considering that I'm a school headmaster, I needed to stay in touch with somebody. What was I supposed to do with the team, with the learning process? It didn't stop. We continued remote teaching. However, teaching was mentally tough when you hear explosions behind your window or read local chats on the news about Russians coming to villages and what they were doing there. I heard a story about Russian soldiers driving down to a town to check documents. The class was in progress, and these so-called soldiers entered a house where a kid was all alone and their parents were at work. And the teacher saw an armed person standing next to the child. Of course, those situations were stressful. What struck me the most is their attitude. They behaved so confidently. They were prepared, like they came with peace and there's a machine gun and he knew what I was about to say to him. They checked our documents and rooms and asked weird questions like whether we saw a particular person or vehicle. When a dozen armed people walk into your yard, it's horrifying. And we taught children as long as we could. The rumours spread that they'll force children to attend school in person, so we followed the recommendation to wrap up our teaching quickly. We decided to stop on May the 1st, quickly covered the programme and gathered one last time. Everybody felt lost. I already knew that the occupiers fancied the school and pressured all educators, especially men. I was constantly reading news on them, kidnapping educators, forcing them to open schools and collaborate. They left the women out at first, just fired them if a headmistress refused to work with them. They took away school keys and the seal. But men, they forced a bag over their heads and drove them to the basement. I spoke to some people who were in that basement at the commander's office in Luzerne. People didn't want to share that experience. It was a miracle when somebody got away from there.
In April, Oleg decided to save himself and his family, so he had to quit his job as a principal.
By late April, the entire government structure had disintegrated. I had nobody to address my resignation to, nobody to call. I remember it like it was yesterday, when they hung their rag of a Russian flag in the neighbouring village. It didn't last long. People would take it away in the evening, and Russian soldiers would come every day and hang a new one, and repressed people heavily for that. They've captured people who would have a finger pointed at them. Over time, people have decided it's better to let it hang there than to pay the price of taking it down. In our village, the Ukrainian flag was up until the 80th day of the war. They either didn't see it or didn't know about it. We thought they didn't know where our local council was according to the new territorial division because they used old Soviet maps, and now village councils are located in different places. Once I drove my kid to the relatives and saw how Russians mangled our flag. They tore it down and hung their rag. From that moment, I realised they stole my home. They stole my homeland. I stopped breathing right there. It was so hard to watch, endure, and drive by every time seeing this nonsense instead of Ukraine.
People started to leave the region massively. The route from Snihorivka to Mykolaiv and Odessa was shelled and littered with checkpoints. Oleg and his family have considered going as well.
April was cold, very cold, and rainy. The mood was very heavy. I was quite unstable since I wasn't ready to leave everything behind, just pack up and leave. I was looking for reasons not to do that. Nobody from my family was ready. I realised how big of a responsibility it was, how dangerous a trip was, and how likely we would not reach our destination. And while I was in this depressive state, we lost the opportunity. We were supposed to leave on April 19th, but the road was closed. I was suicidal, the mousetrap shut. Leaving was impossible. Staying, dangerous. Emotionally, it was devastating. I begged my wife for forgiveness on my knees. All my antidepressants and drugs that could calm my nervous system ran low. The tentacles of occupation started to spread over the seaside and reached us. Some people took over the local government. School was off and only security guards remained there. I visited now and then. It was quiet and safe. The village, usually so populated, was dead quiet. People would run to buy bread in the morning and then quiet would roll in. We could not hear a single voice. It was surreal. Of course, there's always work in the village, and I remember us planting vegetables and listening to the artillery shelling in the distance. And under the constant rumble, I thank God for it being far and not yet near us. Later, I started thinking that liberation maybe would never come.
Until the internet connection disappeared, Oleg always followed Ukrainian news with his family.
When cellular signal would disappear, the terror settled in. Internet vanished for the first time on Remembrance Sunday after Easter. We couldn't contact anybody and didn't understand what was going on. We followed the news more closely before, and the international vacuum pressured our nerves substantially. This was when the Russians kidnapped the first person from our village. Nobody knew why. Kind people said something about them, apparently, and Russians decided to teach that person a lesson. It was terrifying to feel that. In late May, mobile network and internet disappeared completely. and Ukrainian providers got replaced with some Russian providers. Many people initially refused to buy SIM cards from them. You couldn't buy one without a passport, and people didn't want to share their information. But obviously people had to connect with their relatives, so they purchased those cards to stay connected, at least within our region. Later, the internet reappeared, connected to the Russian providers. To communicate with our relatives, we needed to use VPN.
Oleg has been living on the Ukraine-controlled territory for 2 months, but still hasn't gotten rid of the habit of wiping his messages and browser history clean. He avoids any questionable topics when he texts his friends who stayed in the occupation. Only the simplest of questions. How are you? How's everything? When Russian flags appeared over the schools, Oleg said to leave again. He realized he couldn't help anybody in the village by himself. His colleagues were also leaving slowly.
One of the reasons why I was forced to leave home and pack my whole life into a backpack was the fear of them coming for me. The fear of being in the basement where there's no exit. Another reason was health. Healthcare was non-existent and medicine was expensive. For example, a blister of headache pills would cost 70 hryvnias. Having health issues, I knew I would not get medical assistance if I needed it here. The third reason was the lack of any means of existence. No money for food. We haven't been paying our utilities since May, since we don't know who gets this money, so we decided it's unnecessary. Mostly Russian produce filled the shelves in the store. We didn't buy them. Even the names. I couldn't eat candy or canned foods manufactured in Russia. Even jar lids. We needed some, but when I saw that they were made in Chelyabinsk, I didn't buy them. Everything hurt. You're at home, but an alien organism slowly creeps into everything that seems to be your own. Enduring this was horrible.
Leaving their planted vegetable garden behind, the family boarded an overcrowded bus and managed to get to Zaporizhia in over a day. Oleg says that it's harder to live now. The situation with schools and teachers is also complicated. He does not understand what teachers in occupied territories should do, especially if they teach math or chemistry.
I stay in touch with relatives and friends every day. There are no words to describe what is happening there now. I cry every day because I know I can't help. Initially, I would send some money, but now it's no use. There's no bank system. People cannot convert the money they have in the bank into cash. I try to support them, to listen to them. But I know how hard it is to live under occupation when it's impossible even to breathe freely. Since February the 24th, I have slept fully dressed on my constantly made bed, so I'm ready to grab my kid and run out of the house to the shelter at any moment. Sometimes it was terrifying because of the rumours of the complete mobilization of all men. I knew there was no way out. There's nowhere to hide in the barren steppe. It's not a forest. When the rumours started about the referendum, if issuing Russian passports, well, it was clear that it would affect us, sooner or later. I know that the people I knew began to collaborate. They have different reasons, financial or giving in to pressure. Of course, I don't think that the Ukrainian government is right when it considers teachers to be collaborators. Many teachers in the occupied territories refused to collaborate and travelled to Crimea for retraining to teach the Russian program. But a village teacher has no other work. We were paid in June for the last time, and likely won't receive anything in July and August because there's nobody managing payroll. To leave or to collaborate. A teacher from a tiny village in the southern Kherson region has nothing to survive on. How can she buy sausage for 900 hryvnias? Winter is coming. A ton of coal costs 12,000 hryvnias, a month's wage. What should a teacher do? Just drop dead. Ukraine called both teachers and utility workers collaborators. Now I think the law exempts utility workers, but the question persists. What should a teacher do?
Russians kidnapped the teachers who stayed but didn't switch to the Russian side. Nobody knows their fate. Oleg mostly fears that the war will drag out and he'll miss the chance to see his elderly relatives. He's afraid of not being able to come home.
I remember the first moment when I came to Zaporizhia. from the occupied territory and saw the Ukrainian flag. Of course, I hugged the first Ukrainian soldier I saw and cried. They asked for my documents, but I couldn't stop. I just broke down. I'm a grown man in my late 40s, but I broke down when I saw the Ukrainian military uniform and heard the Ukrainian language. I dropped to my knees when I saw the Ukrainian flag in Zaporizhzhia. I thought I had come home to Ukraine. They took Ukraine away from me. They were taking it away daily and trying to squeeze Ukraine out of us.
However, everything is not that easy. The life of an internally displaced person is tough.
Nobody needs you here. Volunteers in Zaporizhzhia help extensively. They deserve a monument for the work they do. They hear everybody out regardless of the time. They treat people very well and supply them with everything during the first days. Then you are on your own. I'm in Podilya now. The rent prices amaze me. They are so high that it's tough to rent a place. All postings state that people rent to locals only. Benefits we receive as displaced people cover food, but where to live and find work, it's a problem. Locals have their own lives. They go home after work to their rooms. The other day, I heard from the locals, yes, we are getting used to the fact that there is a war going on somewhere, but we have to live our lives. We are already used to the fact that there are no tomatoes and watermelons from Kherson. It hurt me so much. How can I think like that if my soul remains there, but my body is here? I live torn in two. I move on the ground, but I don't feel it. The ground doesn't hold you and slips away beneath your feet. I constantly think about whether tomorrow there will be something to pay for housing and buy food for my child. And if it isn't, I want to scream, but no one will hear me. Clearly, we must achieve everything on our own. Sure, we lost everything we had cared about for years. We had a stable job and a comfort zone, and now we are helpless. The future of staying in a foreign city, unable to return home, is scary. But there is hope every day and a powerful belief that only Ukraine will win in this unjust war.
We cannot verify every fact of this testimonial. We can only learn about the things happening in the occupied territories from the people who lived through this experience. That was me, Catherine Litvinchova. Please share our podcast with your friends and support our project on Patreon. All links are listed in the episode description. Stay safe and listen to Ukrainians.